This episode is brought to you by AMC and AMC Plus, presenting Anne Rice's Interview with the Vampire Season 2 for your consideration.
Not really, because he was just like off.
In the zone.
Yeah, he was like over there. We had like a thing.
What?
Over there? What was that?
What does over there mean?
Bro, you know how you are. What are you talking about?
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to The Envelope. Kelvin Washington, glad to be here with a couple of folks you know. We have Ivan Villarreal, also Mark Olson. Everybody doing good? Everybody well?
Doing good.
Did you acknowledge how getting better with the name?
You're really getting better with the rolling of the R's.
Thank you.
Kudos to you.
All right, so that's the only time I'm doing it this episode, just so I can stay on a hot streak here. Let's talk about this. The piano lesson, you had the brothers in this. You had Malcom and also John David Washington. Tell us about work, spending time with them and also this film.
Malcom Washington and John David Washington, who of course are the sons of Denzel and Pauletta. So they already hail from quite the dynasty. And Malcom co-wrote and directed this adaptation of August Wilson's Pulitzer Prize-winning play. And it tells, it really tells the story of a brother and sister debating what to do with an heirloom that was engraved by an enslaved family member. And it really tackles this idea of the past and the future through their dynamic. And John David, returns to this character, Boy Willie, who is the brother in this story. And it's a role that he made his Broadway debut with the recent stage revival of the play. And it was, fun to hear the brothers talk about what it's like collaborating as brothers, because I don't think I could do it.
Right, a lot.
It's a lot.
Arguing.
A lot, but they seemed to handle it well, and it really was a family affair. Their sisters were involved as well as their parents. But it was interesting to hear Malcom talk about his approach for this adaptation and to hear John David talk about sitting with this character for as long as he has.
I think it's going to be cool just to also, as you mentioned, the sisters being involved. And obviously Malcom, who wasn't maybe as known as John David, obviously his parents. So it's cool to continue to see the layers of the Washington family they be, out there, exposed. We're getting to know more about them. Swing over to you, Mark. We have Justin Kuritzkes, Challengers, also queer. A couple of films here. Tell us about Justin and also these films.
Well, he really has emerged as one of the most exciting new screenwriter voices this year. He had his film Challengers that came out earlier in the year, starred Zendaya and Josh O'Connor and Mike Feist. And that's a sort of a love triangle set amid the world of tennis. And then working with the director, Luca Guadagnino, that sort of their collaboration then rolled forward into making Queer, which is an adaptation of the novel by William S. Burroughs. It stars Daniel Craig. And so this has just turned into such a big year for Justin with both an original screenplay and an adapted screenplay, seeming like they're going to be in the mix for competition.
All right, that sounds interesting. We'll get to that in just a bit. But right now, here is Ivan with Malcom and John David Washington with the piano lesson.
Well, thank you both so much for being here. El Segundo, we got you out to El Segundo.
Yeah.
Well, I have to say, your take on the piano lesson is such a dynamic adaptation of August Wilson's work. And I'm curious, you co-wrote this and directed it. You're returning to the character of Boy Willie after starring in the recent stage revival. But I imagine you guys came to this work a lot sooner than that. Your father is a student of Wilson's work. Tell me what you remember about your first introduction to the play.
My introduction was when I wanted to do it, 2019, to this particular one. But I had read Seven Guitars years ago. I got to experience Fences, seeing it on Broadway, saw Two Trains Running, an Atlanta production that my mother was in, and our director of the play directed, LaTanya Jackson. But when I got into this, I found myself thinking like this might be my favorite of the ones I've read because of the supernatural element and the family dynamic. And something about Boy Willie's character really spoke to me, and there was, I knew I couldn't pinpoint it and articulate it then like I can now maybe. I knew that my life was going to change after I explored this character.
Why?
I think what he deals with, well, for one, the words, the poetic writing, the brilliance of August Wilson, to be able to chew on those monologues, especially towards the end, those when he's talking about death and how he's overcome death and inherited his father's trade and how to be a farmer and the anthropomorphic nature and relationship he has with his tools. I was like, to be able to really dive into that, doing that every night, I knew I was going to be a different actor because there's so many layers to that writing. And yes, there's a wow factor to it. He's funny, he's charming, he's passionate, but underneath it, what's happening at the same time is the trauma and the pain and his experience that he hasn't properly gotten to express, but he does it here. And then as an actor, sorry for getting long-winded, but you asked.
Yeah, I did ask.
Because I was just excited. But as an actor, when you're able to, when it's in dialogue, everything the character's going through, everything that his insecurities, his flaws that are actually in words, as an actor, you salivate. You know, you live for those moments. So it's an incredible experience. So if I could conquer that, if I could do that, I felt as an actor I can do anything and answer my own questions about my faith and my relationship to the artistry itself.
How about for you, Malcolm? When did you first come to this work?
It was when he started working on it. We were it was like in lockdown, COVID lockdown. So we were staying together again. My whole family came together. It was like high school again. You know, sleeping in your childhood bed and that kind of thing. And I saw he was kind of preparing away over there. And I had never read it before, but I'd seen what he was doing. So I was like, let me just take a peek at what he's working on and read it for the first time. And it was a profound experience.
What do you think it was that really spoke to you about it? And you mentioned you were with your family at the time. Were there a lot of conversations over the dinner table about this text?
Not really, because he was just like off
In the zone.
Yeah, he was like over there. We had like a thing.
What?
Over there?
What was that?
What does over there mean?
Bro, you know how you are. What are you talking about?
Oh my God. Continue. I'm sorry. I mean, this is your
When
experience.
he prepares,
This is your truth.
he goes into a
Lockdown.
corner. Over there.
Over
and
there?
We're all over here.
What are you doing? Now
Yeah,
you're just
he's
hyping it up.
I want to know more about over there. But
Yeah,
first,
over there. It's an extreme focus. You know, we'll give him that.
Yeah.
But when I read it, it hit me in a moment where I was ready to receive it. You know, I was in my parents' my parents' house, and I was archiving our family photos, and I was like looking at images of my grandparents and great-grandparents and so on, and trying to find a connection between their stories and mine and understand myself in relation to them, that parts of them live in me now, you know? So I was kind of just already wrestling with things like that. And when I read the piano lesson, it was something that confronted that idea directly, you know, it was expressing that and gave me an opportunity to learn more about that and read more into it. So it was a really profound moment.
tell me more about that. I feel like, as you know, in our youth, we sort of want to, you know, distance ourselves from our parents sometimes, or, you know, figure things out on our own. But as we get older, we sort of crave that connection or understanding them differently. Like, I know for me, I used to hate like the music my mom would listen to. Now
Yeah,
it's
really?
all I listen to
Yeah.
on my drives. Like, this is my way to connect with her, or like now I see it in a different way. Or even the shows my father watched. Do you find that you experience that yourself, or you're like, whatever?
No. Well, I was just about to ask you, what, like, for example, what artists? Because like Sade, you know, Anita Baker. I mean, it reminds me of like I'm 7 years old riding in the car with my parents. But I've never hated that music. I've always loved it, and I appreciate it even more. I think I understand her lyrics a little better now as I gotten older. So.
Mine was Mexican music, because I was like,
yeah.
I want to, you know, listen to the American artists, but now I'm like, give it to me.
But that's like so interesting, right? Because it's about identity. It's about identity. It's who you see yourself as. Who do you make yourself to be?
Yeah.
And when you kind of take that departure and you are finding your own independence, your own autonomy, you define yourself in relation to yourself at those crucial development stages, you know, in your teens to 20s. That's so important to you to build that up for yourself. And I think that you see that play out in the characters in our film. They build it up for themselves, and then later, once you have a little more perspective, you have a little more worldview, you're like, hold on, wait, I've been denying myself this huge resource, which is generations and centuries of experiences that I'm directly tapped into. If I can open up myself to it, then you can build on that. And that's why I feel like later in our life, we reconnect to it and say, oh, actually, I'm Mexican and American, that both of these identities live in me. And I'm encouraged and fortified by that.
I grew up in a family that's a lot like past my grandparents isn't known. They didn't really share stories. And that's what I really enjoy about this, is the passing down of stories and learning about your history. There's so much gap in history that I don't know. were you a family that talked a lot about, where you come from in your past and, what your grandparents, great-grandparents, their stories?
Definitely more now. Definitely more now. We have a direct connection to my grandparents on my mom's side for sure. Like we grew up she's from North Carolina. And our story in the film is a story of migration. And it's a story of people that have come, the American South is like the Black ancestral homeland. Like that's where so many of our stories as a culture originate. That's where we're tied to. And growing up in LA, it's like there's always Black people in LA were always kind of tied back often to Mississippi, Louisiana. That's like the path of the Great Migration. So what comes with you in that journey, what cultural traditions, what touchstones come with you is something that you get tied to, but over time you can lose that connection. My mom has always been really great about continuing that connection for us, but as we've gotten older, it's been nice that more stories come out. My dad, it seems like every 2 months, gives me some old photo or something, and he's like, that was your grandpa. He was like, and tells some story. So it's opened him up in a certain kind of way, and it's been wonderful.
Do you have a favorite family story?
I have several. It might not be that interesting, but it's very emotional for me, where it was for my birthday. I could have been no more than 8, 7 years old. And I wanted this football helmet that Marcus Allen wore. And like there was a certain face mask that he had. It was very specific. I knew what it was. And my grandfather, God bless him, we drove all around North Carolina. And there's a lot of factories in North Carolina. And it took all day, and I was getting devastated. I was getting discouraged. And we finally found one, a Rydell helmet. I got it's in my room right now. It's all white with the red face mask, and he found it. And it was just the fact that he was so patient, my grandfather, but cared that much, and we found it. And this is a man that college educated, was a principal, then became a custodian. Then my grandfather, preacher, farmer. But these were very patient men. And from what I remember that patience. I remember their quiet calmness and their confidence. And these people, these men have seen so many things. So I'm connected to that. And in the artistry, I try to pay it forward and remember them.
Do you feel like you need to guard that helmet with your life? Like this is a thing I want to pass down?
Well, I guard the memory.
The memory.
Of my life. Things happen, but I have the memory, which is what we're talking about, these stories. How August Wilson's writes. In the familial sense, you see them communicating, sharing stories. The uncles and the nephew talking about, and Lyman talking about the Parchment Farm experience. They can exchange these traumatic instances or these triumphant moments through song, through dance, and through communication and alcohol.
Malcom, how intentional was this for the piano lesson to be the work that was your directorial debut? Why was it important for you?
It wasn't that intentional. It was sometimes, what they say in Alchemist, it's so corny quoting The Alchemist, but whatever.
Love it.
Yeah, it's like if you want something bad enough, the universe conspires to make it happen. I wanted to tell stories, I wanted to be a filmmaker, and the conspiring was me meeting this text at a moment when I was most ready to engage in it. So I think that it was more of that. It's like that idea that I really needed to understand these things for myself, for my own understanding of who I am as a man and what I want to do in the world and my life in context of so much that came before. It was more wrestling with that thought that turned into the film.
Well, and it very much became a family affair. Olivia, your sister Olivia and your mother Pauletta are in the cast, and your other sister Katya and your father Denzel are among the producers. Can you tell me what the experience is like collaborating with your family on that level? Because I love my family, but I don't know if I could create something with them. I very much
hearing that a lot from people. They can't believe that we didn't kill each other.
Exactly. I mean, I was that person that had to have control of the group project at school, so I don't think I could work well with others. But
Well, so to that point, I think everybody understood their position. It's his vision, it's his movie. So we go as our director goes. With that power, though, he was very generous with it, and he established an environment of creativity. Throw your ideas out. It was a very safe environment, and I think, as vulnerable as I spoke of too, like what this means to me, this play and this character, I needed family because there was going to be a lot of trial and error. There's going to be a lot of vulnerability in a way that I don't know if I could have done it the way I did it if I couldn't be that vulnerable, if I could have been that honest. If I was being, sometimes you have to protect yourself and on set, depending on who you're working with, but you didn't have to. If you protected yourself, you're doing a disservice to the entire work. So we all knew what our assignment was. We knew our positions, and it felt very good. It felt nice.
How was it for you? Like, did you settle into your confidence? Did you start with the confidence, or did you second guess yourself and rely on,
Yeah, if you're doing something you really care about, there's always a certain pressure and doubt of like, I hope that I'm, doing this to the best of my ability.
Yeah.
But I was so empowered by our cast and crew. Like, we had such incredible people working with us, and we became such a strong community together that it wasn't about me, it was about all of us, and we all poured everything into it. So it was such a community that there was no pressure after. Once you kind of submit to the group, it's like, we're all just in it together, figuring it out every day.
And Sutter was standing there in the hall.
What do you look like?
He looked like Sutter. He looked like he always looked.
Sutter come find his way from Big Sandy to Little Sandy. How you gonna find his way all the way up here to Pittsburgh? Sutter ain't never even heard of Pittsburgh.
Let Bernice finish. I want to hear what you got to say.
Just standing there with a blue suit on.
The man never left Marlin County when he was living. He gonna come all the way up here now that he's dead.
Go on, Bernice.
Tell you this, if Bunny seen him like she thinks she seen him, she still be running.
Go on, Bernice. Don't baby boy Willie no mind.
Do you feel like you have a shorthand with each other? Did it make the process easier? Yeah.
A look.
A look?
A lot of times what he didn't say, we just knew it, which is, you on set, I think that's so important. Again, so I talked about the vulnerability of it and just wanting to do, we all wanted to do so well, all of us together for August Wilson. So that, we definitely had a shorthand.
Do you remember a note that really helped you in a way you weren't expecting?
He told me to calm down on the first day. I came in a little hyped, little amped up. But that speaks to day one. I know the play, but this isn't the play. This is something different. That you harness it and just use that energy for the work. And I love that he told me that, and it was the first day, so it established the tone. So that was one of the more memorable ones.
How would you say it was directing your brother?
A dream. It was really wonderful. It's like working.
He wasn't over there.
He was very present.
He was very present.
Very present.
Okay.
We're gonna have to define this at some point. Over there.
But he's somebody with so many great ideas and so much creative energy that when you're in the room, when he's in that zone, when you're in the room with him, it changes the room and everybody has to respond to that in a way that keeps the film really alive, and it was great.
How did you think about how to make this accessible for today, and shorten the distance between the younger generation and this work?
Both in the language, the visual language of it, and the tone of it, and in the music. The themes of the film resonated with me, and I felt like that could be translated. Some of it is dealing with how do we process trauma? How do we confront our past? How do we confront parts of ourselves that we don't want to deal with? How do we do that? That's like a very contemporary idea, and so many people younger than me have a much better language about how to confront ideas of whether it's their mental health or how they process anxiety. Like they're a much better equipped generation than the ones that came before them. So I think that's something that connects directly. Also, dealing in genre, right? Like making a film that's exciting, that's scary in moments, and just deals with supernatural. There's a ghost, a haunting, these ideas. And also the music itself. Like I am such a product of the BET and MTV generation, of Power 106 and music.
Big Boy.
Yeah.
Baker Boys. That's back in the day, Baker Boys.
But music shaping our culture. So to engage contemporary music and music that spans time, spans the decades, to put that in something like this, I think was exciting too.
Because did you have to fight any impulse, or I don't know if there were executives thinking this, but to completely modernize this thing?
I really respect the text and wanted the spirit of that to be there. So I wasn't throwing the baby out with the bathwater. It was more connecting that to contemporary time. But I hope that with these, there's 7 other August Wilson plays that haven't been adapted to films. I hope with them they do push push past what we did even, you know, and continue to stretch what these interpretations can be, and have radical visions for it. You know, I hope they challenge it.
One thing I want to say too, I think, in addition to what he's talking about, music and otherwise, is who he hired, the cast. Now we're standing on the shoulders of Wilsonians. Michael Potts, I believe he's done every play. Samuel Jackson originated the role Boy Willie, 1987, repertory. Ray Fisher, DC, Rebel Moon, you know, a lot of he's bringing a fan base. They've never seen him like this. He's actually the theater geek, you know, he's a theater rat. You know, we got, Corey Hawkins, who's coming off of a Tony nomination. Incredible actor. Dr. Dre, never seen him quite like this. Danielle Deadweiler, obviously, no need for me to even say. So seeing people like actors that you know, that you've been following in this context, in this story, that's part of the intergenerational thing. And the words are there. He's written it that way. He's written it it was intended. He's literally said this in an interview with August Wilson, that he wants it to reach everybody. That's the intention, not just the theater. So you're seeing that in the hires, you're seeing that in the chemistry.
With the department heads too, you know, our cinematographer, he did Us and It Follows, and these really exciting movies and for younger audiences, and our composer, our editor, everybody. We all have the same vision for it.
I want to talk about the way you thought about the piano. I mean, it's such a looming presence, obviously, in the work. We see people leaning on it. We see it sort of over there.
Would you keep this going? Keep this going. Okay.
As Bernice and Boy Willie sort of have their battles, it's lurking in the background. Talk about like the process of creating the design and what you want. I mean, there's even times where we get the perspective of the piano with how the camera's angled, like we're in it. Talk a little bit about what you wanted out of that.
Yeah, so this is a haunting, this story. It's a ghost story. And the piano is both a physical object and has so much significance to it too. And all of these things have to be imbued into it, right? The piano acts as an altar in our story. It's an altar for Bernice that she must go to and touch and activate. It's the conduit between us and our ancestors. So it has to have all these meanings. So when we were constructing it, we tried to imbue as much meaning as we could put into it, and hopefully that would kind of come through. Our production designer David Bamba he was very committed to this idea of how do we make this mean something.
Lovely man.
Yeah.
He feels everything, right?
Incredible artist.
Yeah.
So we worked off the foundation that was laid for us by the first production of the piano lesson, and we took the basic structure the blueprint that they had for it, and we built on it. We carved faces of our ancestors onto the piano, so that it represented real people, it represented real stories immediately. And in that process, we hoped that feeling would emanate from it, and when we're working in the space, that would kind of come through. All the images in the film, all the portraits you see, they're all real people that are connected to our production, either from my family or Danielle's family, some of our crew's family. They're all those faces are connected to this story. So we wanted to charge the set in that way, both with the piano and everything around it.
Look here, Lonnie. You see all them carvings on it? See, that's what I was talking about. You see how it's all carved up real nice and polished and everything? Never find you another piano like that.
Yeah, that look real nice.
I told you. Get you a nice price for that piano.
That's all Boy Willie talked about the whole trip up here. I got tired of him talking about the piano.
Hey, Doka, Sutter's brother selling the land. Say he want to sell it to me. That's why I come up here. Now, I got one part. I sell them watermelons, I get me another part. Then I get Bernice to sell that piano, and I had a third part.
Bernice ain't gonna sell that piano.
I'm gonna talk to her. When she see I got a chance to get Sutter's land, she'll come around.
You can get that thought out your mind. Bernice ain't gonna sell that piano.
What was it like being near that?
Everything he's talking about, it informed the performance. So there might be choices you didn't necessarily know that were going to be happening, and he yells action and it's happening. There's literally an ad lib, which is a no-no, August Wilson, that Boy Willie says to his niece. You feel that? That's your family, that's your blood. Now, he didn't write that, but like, I
felt
felt
it.
compelled to say that. I didn't plan for it, but because of what I'm touching, because of what I'm looking at, this thing that lives, it's its own life, you know. And I love how the movie opens. It's almost like we're in the perspective of the piano, like we're like that's the lead character, you know. This is what we're fighting for. So, I love that.
Where is the piano now?
Parts of it are at my house.
Parts of it.
Yeah, the piano. So there was actually two. We made two pianos. One exists. Netflix owns that. It's in there, wherever they.
We're
keep
gonna get
these
it back.
things. Yeah.
We're gonna get it back.
We gotta go steal it.
Yeah, we're gonna go steal
Get your
it.
people.
Yeah.
Listen, they're everywhere. I don't know about that.
But the panels of the piano that have the actual carvings on it, those live in my living room.
I mean, you talked earlier about, Mr. Samuel L. Jackson, played Boy Willie in the original production. He's obviously in this playing one of the uncles, Doker Charles. And I know his wife, LaTanya Jackson, who directed the stage revival, had sort of instructed him not to give you any advice about Boy Willie.
Yeah.
And I guess you stopped asking after a while. But but have you had a chance to dissect this character with him or hear his thoughts about Boy Willie? Like, what of those conversations? Did it illuminate anything for you?
What was interesting, it was like one of our first interviews. This was before we did the play. And he just exploded with some truth about his life and his relationship to the play, which it was like, oh my God. And we talked more about it, how, he talked about how he relapsed because of this role. So he originated it because Charles Dutton wasn't available. Then Charles Dutton became available for the Broadway run. He wins the Tony, and Sam Jackson was his understudy. And like how emotional that was, what this character meant to him from 1987. I got pictures of, they have August Wilson's estate. They have pictures of him on stage at Yale. There's like, so we talked about more so the relationship that Boy Willie has in our actual life, more so than the character, and what it meant to him in 1987, what it means to me in 2022, and how it's sort of a defining moment for him in his life, me in my life. So that was interesting. I mean, there was one critique. I was eating banana chips during a table read, and he called me out on like, that nigga don't eat no banana chips, 1936. Like, this is John David eating banana chips, trying to find the character. I'm not in character. This is my banana chips. And then, of course, Michael Potts laugh, which is contagious. You laugh, when he's laughing, you wonder, what's he laughing about? I just want to laugh with him. They just ganged up on me. So in that regard, that was good stuff. But nothing specific to the character. At least I'm not going to share it with y'all, because I'm not a snitch. Okay.
How intimidating is it, though, to embody this character that he reveres so much in front of him?
Great question. It was terrifying every night. That was a part of the challenge, knowing that my old man is a producer, knowing that Sam Jackson originated, knowing that Michael Potts intimately familiar with all August Wilson's words. He's off book on any play at any moment, giants. And here I am. Again, that's why I'm talking about the defining moment for me. But it was one that I felt encouraged to do. I mean, once they signed off on me, it was off to the races. I'm going for it. But yeah, every night I'm finding new discoveries, and I'm looking at him, listening to me, reacting to me. And but he was very gracious, and he was a true uncle-like in that way. And he's a tough critic, as we all know. Sam don't like nobody. so if he likes you, you're in good hands. It was such a relief, to say the least.
Well, not to belabor this point, but I want to talk about more seriously what over there does involve for you. Like, what does your prep work or your focus look like as you get into this is a character that you've sat with for 2 years, but I imagine it still feels like there's stuff to find out about him, or you're still discovering. So tell me what that's like.
The process. It varies from job to job, character to character. With August Wilson's brilliant writing, you don't have to go search. It'll come to you if you're just open to it. So I had to just think about the helmet story, the Rydell helmet situation. My Uncle Woodson, whose chain I wear. I stayed in North Carolina for 2 weeks. I brought in my birthday there. I was visiting, talking to my grandfather's gravesite, talking to my Uncle Woodson's gravesite, telling him what I'm about to do to help me, to guide me, to be there with me, that kind of thing. And you trust and hope that it's there. I mean, I have my journals. I have like books and books I've written about the feelings about lines and feelings about what he thought, his journey with his spiritual journey, all that, the fears I have, trying to do great for my brother, do great for my sister who's a producer. So all these things I just conjure up. But then you have to let it go on the day and trust that it's in your body and in your spirit.
Malcom, to bring it back to Mr. Jackson, how the heck do you pitch Samuel L. Jackson to come do this film of this character?
It's a good question because, he's somebody, as discussed, who's as connected to this material as anybody on earth. He's been attached to it for 40 years. So it was a big, it was a big undertaking. And
Do you create a PowerPoint presentation?
I made so many materials. Yeah. I had books. I cut little videos. We wrote the script. That was like a big pitch document because the script is very different from the play. So I wanted to go into this with an understanding of like, hey, here's what I plan to do with it. Like, here's the risks we're taking, the swings we're taking. Like, here it is in the script. So I took it to his house and was kind of coming prepared to make this, presentation. And he came and just started talking to me about people in his family. He started showing me his photos of his ancestors, and we just went off into that. And we started talking about the themes of the movie without talking about the movie. It was just honest, and it was two generations meeting in the middle, and having a shared understanding and shared vision. And at the end, he shook my hand. He said, "Let's do it," and it was incredible.
So what is it actually like to direct Samuel L. Jackson? How do you give him a note? Do you give him a note?
You still have to do your job. There's a job you got to do. But he's somebody who's so generous, both in his time and in his experience. If you look at his catalog, he's worked with so many up-and-coming filmmakers. He's worked with a lot of young directors. Somebody that, a legend on his status, you wouldn't expect to have made so many films with younger directors, but he is constantly grooming the next generation and giving opportunities out. So I was grateful to share that moment with him.
That part where he's in the kitchen and just like the power that he can bring to a moment like that.
Yeah.
I can never.
Well, that opening line, that almost shot you,
Oh,
boy.
yeah.
Like, we were off to the races
Off
after
to
you
the
said
races,
that.
yeah. And so it was just fun, And he's a different kind of Sam in this movie than in other films. He's still dynamic and exciting, but I think he really flexes his chops, and he's like, hey, I'm a movie star, but I got a bunch of different pitches in my arsenal. So.
Yeah. Well, as we've talked about in this conversation, this film is about, legacy and also the debate of like whether you should use that legacy to build a better future or how you can do that. And I imagine, for me as a viewer, I sort of kept changing my position of whose side I'm on. And I imagine you've changed your position all this time. I'm going to ask you.
Well, first I'm going to ask you. That's why I'm making this face. Where'd you land on that?
I think the last time I checked in with myself, I was Team Bernice because I get very nostalgic about. But tell me.
5 in 100. 5 wins to 100 losses.
Sell me on yours.
And right now, no, I'm probably with you too. I'm probably with Bernice too. No, I listen. I love how he's on his front foot with his beliefs. I love how this is. I mean, he's kind of crazy. Like he wants to go back to the South and reclaim this land. I mean, he says in the play, like, ain't no difference in me and the white man. That's how he sees himself. Don't matter what the law say to me. It matters if a person is right or not. And I think the fact that he wants to take care of his family, or leave something for his family, cultivate generational wealth, provide jobs for his family later on down the line, I think that's admirable and forward thinking in 1936. But they both present great points. But I can't land on it.
Malcom?
I think the truth is a synthesis. You need both, and they needed each other. They couldn't.
You dismantle it like the way you have it at your home.
Exactly. You dismantle it exactly, and build a new future. And they needed each other. That embrace that they have at the end, it's like that's what it's about. It's like I needed both. There needed to be an exchange here, and Boy Willie will find a way, and so will she. So will Bernice.
Do you think he found a way?
Well, he does say if real quick, like if you're using it, I have to find another way. So he does bring that out. But it's interesting what the film does and like what I'm approaching the character. To me, he knew he was gonna die. I think there was like this, and he was okay with that. So to me, it was like once he goes back there, even if he does get the land, as he says, he's probably still gonna die. So, but the film, gives it hope, and we don't see that necessarily. So, but personally, I had this this feeling that there's this ticking time clock of like, you know, this was somewhat, this visit to Pittsburgh wasn't really about the piano necessarily, but to find favor and forgiveness from his sister, from his family before he, you know, probably goes to his, you know, his demise.
There's obviously that crucial moment in the story where we learn the backstory of the piano. And, you know, we see Boy Willie process that story as a grown man, but also you get a sense of the little boy inside. How did you approach that scene and what you wanted to convey in that silence?
Well, the film is telling you that. I think what you picked up on. So it's a remarkable job by Leslie and Malcom and how they crafted that. It's interesting, you know, he might not necessarily want to hear that at that time, you know, and he might see it another way, you know, not, you know, and he might be, I don't know, ashamed of it, but maybe proud of that moment, not necessarily remorseful about it or sad about it. I don't know. You know, it's something that I think if he thinks about it too long, it's going to be a distraction from what he's trying to do. The love I was talking about before, that the forgiveness that he's trying to get from his family. So that moment, there's a whole bunch of things working, which is, I think, is what's beautiful about what they crafted.
Malcom, I mean, you're faithful to the text, but you and your co-writer Virgil Williams do bookend them in ways that take us beyond the central setting. And you open the film with, you know, like looking at that moment of 4th of July in 1911. Talk about wanting to open it with that way and sort of allow us to see what had happened.
Yeah, we wanted to recontextualize the story, to visualize and deeper explore its themes. You know, there's a strong theme here and thread of Black American reclamation that runs through it, a taking back and retelling your own story and declaring who you are as a people, as a person, and your histories. You know, examining that is something that we were interested in right away. And we also wanted to put Boy Willie at the scene of the crime. You know, this is such a big moment in his life, bring out the father-son story that's in there. This is such a big moment where the last time he sees his father is this night. That's tied to this touchstone to the whole history of their family. How special is that? Like, how much can we mine that to understand his character? Because Boy Willie is so clear about what he wants. He's so singular in how he goes about it. You know, he sees this thing and he's going after it. And how can we help the audience understand what's happening under the hood there, what's happening internally, and recontextualizing the story in that way, I thought, gave us more insight into his character, gave us more access into his interior life and what was happening internally.
That's why I love this character, though, because, like, to that point, because there is that dynamic, and then there's what August Wilson wrote as well about, again, I talked about it before, his relationship to death and faith in God. You know, he's such a full character and so complicated, walking contradiction at times. So to mine that and to use it and to display it in cinematic form, it was fantastic.
How would you describe what the piano lesson, or even just the character, how it stays in your system? I mean, it stayed in your system for a while, but like, it seems like it's now just in there, or am I overthinking that?
Michael Potts talked about this a bit. Like, you never really forget the monologues. It never leaves you, and that's the power of the penmanship in August Wilson. To me personally, too, what I was talking about before about Sam Jackson as well, how personal it is. It's now forever tethered to a lot of memories I have with my uncle and my grandfather. It's almost like an offering to them. Like, this is some way that I imagine what they would have thought about this if they were alive to see this. Both of my grandfathers on both sides. So a lot of my memories, the one I shared with you earlier, there's another chapter to that now, and that's this story. That's this experience from the play to the movie. So it's forever in me because of how I adopted those memories and folded them into the process of doing this film.
I have to say, you know, the film is about to be available to stream on Netflix the same week that your father's role in Gladiator 2 comes out in theaters. And for him, he's playing a character that's trying to reclaim his power in a more vengeful way. I'm just curious, like, that performance just had me wrapped. Like
Right.
it's so
Gladiator.
sly
Yeah.
and brilliant and fun. Can you talk to me about watching your father do something like that?
Well, I just, he's one of the greatest of all time. I've been a fan of his since I was, born. You know what I mean? But it's funny. I've been going back a lot recently. I've been watching Philadelphia like on repeat. I just went through this like Jonathan Demme run, and just landed on that a lot. And just that performance you're talking about, and when you compare it to like some of his stuff in the '90s, you're seeing the dexterity, you're seeing the range that maybe hasn't been fully appreciated, and this character might make people appreciate even more so what he's done. This character is almost on some of the shoulders of those other characters he's played, so it just shows you with longevity, drive, and this fervent passion for what you do, what can be produced at this age. You have to love it, and I've been on sets with some people, these G's, Sam is one of them, right? That at their age, that they've conquered so much, you still have to love it. And I think you see just how much he's enjoying himself.
And it's so fun watching that film. I think Fred and
Fred.
Paul
They
and
killed it.
yeah, and Pedro. It's such a great group of actors there. Connie, and they just made something great.
Thank you both so much for taking the time to speak with me. It was such a pleasure, and congratulations on the film.
Thank
It's
you.
really good.
Thank you. Thanks.
I'll see you at Shakey's.
I'll see
You
you at
know what I'm
Shakey's.
saying? Shout out Whittier.
Shout out to
where the
Whittier.
girls are prettier.
After the break, Mark's interview with Justin Kuritzkes from Challengers and Queer.
For the Los Angeles Times and The Envelope, I'm Mark Olson, and I'm here today with Justin Kuritzkes, the screenwriter of both Challengers and Queer. Now, Justin, you live in New York, but you're actually originally from Los Angeles. What is it like when you come back here?
It's great. I always miss it when I come back here. I left Los Angeles when I went to college and then moved to New York and have been there for 12 years. But I thought I didn't like Los Angeles, but now every time I come back, I really love it.
Challengers was originally intended to come out last year, but because of the strike, it ended up being released this year. So you actually have both of these films coming out this year. What has this been like for you so far?
It's a weird sort of circumstance that they both ended up coming out this year. And, Challengers, we were supposed to go premiere at Venice in 2023, and then the strikes happened, and I was actually on set for Queer when the writer's strike broke out, and then I had to come home. So all of a sudden the year I was planning for in 2023 looked very different. But then it's led to this really kind of nice situation where I have two movies coming out in 2024 that are really different movies.
The first thing I want to ask you is, do people actually smash their rackets that much in high-level tennis?
Have you watched high-level tennis? Yeah, they do it. They do it in low-level tennis. Yeah, they smash their rackets a lot. So much so that there's a whole system of penalties based around racket abuse. If you're an experienced player, you know that once you start abusing the racket, that's one penalty, so you may as well go all out, and really destroy it.
I know one thing I have come to really appreciate about the movie is simply its structure, the way that you have the sort of challenger final as the spine of the story. And there are these series of flashbacks that we get throughout the movie that are creeping closer and closer to the events of the final. How did you kind of come to that structure, and what did you like about it?
The structure kind of came of a piece with the inspiration to write the movie in the first place, which was that I hadn't been a massive tennis fan, or even really like a big sports fan. And then I just found myself in 2018 watching the US Open because it was on. And it was the match between Naomi Osaka and Serena Williams in the final. And there was this very controversial call by the umpire where he accused Serena Williams of receiving coaching from the sidelines. And I had never heard about this rule because, again, I didn't watch a lot of tennis. But immediately that struck me as this intensely cinematic situation. That you're alone on the court, and there's this one other person in this massive stadium who cares as much about what happens to you out there as you do. And that's the person you can't talk to. And so I started thinking, well, what if you really needed to talk about something? And what if it was something beyond tennis? What if it was about the two of you? And what if somehow it included the person across the net? How could you have that conversation? And how could you communicate the tension of that using film? That started me thinking about writing this movie, but then it also started this path of me becoming a legitimate obsessive tennis fan, to the point where I was watching so much tennis initially for research, but then eventually just because it was like the only thing that was holding my attention. It was better than movies, it was better than TV. And that really freaked me out because I started to ask myself what felt like an existential question of what could I write that would be as good as tennis? And then next to that, this question, well, what would make tennis even better? And for me, the answer to that question was tennis would be better if I could know at every moment exactly what was at stake. And not just on a sort of superficial level, but on a deep emotional level. Within that desire to write this movie in the first place comes a structure where you drop the audience into a match and gradually they get let in on the secret of why this thing matters so much. So that was all kind of there from the beginning, and then the details came as I thought about it for a couple of years doing other stuff, and then finally sat down to write it in 2021.
Hitting a ball with a racket is a great way to avoid having a job.
Well, that's also your problem. Because you think that tennis is about expressing yourself, doing your thing. That's why you still have that serve.
It works.
Yeah, but you're not a tennis player. So you don't know what tennis is.
What is it?
It's a relationship.
And then one thing I think people find so striking about the movie is simply the energy of it. And that's in the music, it's in the editing, it's in the performances. But how did you kind of convey that on the page?
A tennis match has its own sort of like logic, its own dramatic logic, and it's building to a crescendo. You know, every tennis match is building to a crescendo. Some are more interesting than others, but they all are flowing in one direction. And so that, I realized, could map itself onto the structure of a story, and pretty naturally mapped itself onto the structure of a story. You know, there's 3 sets in tennis, in most tennis, except for Grand Slams, where the men play 5 sets. But this is a movie about the Challenger Tour, where it's full of guys who maybe never play 5-set matches, you know. So that matched up. But then on a page-by-page level, I mean, this is like so silly, it's almost embarrassing to talk about, but like, I kind of realized that the way we were going to transition between time periods was going to be through tennis courts, because every tennis court basically looks the same, you know, especially if they're all the same surface, which in this movie they are. It's all hard courts. And so tennis courts became a kind of time machine. And I knew that the way that we would move from one time period to another would be the movement of the ball across the net. So I started writing in the script thwack instead of like smash cut 2 or, you know, match cut or something like that. I just wrote thwack, and that became the signal to the reader that we're going somewhere, you know.
And then tell me more about that. I mean, you've been known up until now as a playwright. How have you found the transition, just style-wise, from playwriting to screenwriting?
You know, the thing that carries over is who you are as a writer, or who you are as a dramatic storyteller, let's say. You know, the kinds of characters, the kinds of situations that feel worth spending time with, or those are the same across mediums. I think what's particular about screenwriting is that it's always 2 things at once. It's, on the one hand, this thing that's supposed to be an exciting and meaningful reading experience, but then on the other hand, it's this very practical document that's meant to serve as a kind of invitation for hundreds of people to do their jobs. And because of that, there's a very rigid formalism to it on just the formatting level. You know, in theater, there's like a standard way that a play is supposed to look that you get taught at some point, but nobody follows that. And if you read 10 plays by 10 different playwrights that you like, they all look different on the page. And in fact, the way that they're written on the page is meant to kind of inform you how you're going to mount them, or how you're going to perform them. And so when I was starting to write screenplays, at first that was very daunting to me, the sort of the rigidity of that formalism, you know, having to write slug lines and all of that, even like having to write action lines, because a lot of my plays, there's no stage directions. It's just characters talking, and I kind of am leaving it up to the director or to the actors to figure it out. But I quickly realized that just like in a play, a screenplay too needs to teach the reader how to read this screenplay, you know, and you have to find your own vocabulary, and you have to sort of create your own parameters of how language works in the world of this movie.
If you'll indulge me in being a little overly literal for just a minute, one of the things I have really enjoyed in rewatching Challengers is the fact that it does seem as if the level of manipulation happening among those three characters, like you can read it a lot of different ways. And so I just have to ask, like, was in fact Tashi manipulating this thing from the start? Like, did she intend for Art and Patrick to play each other from the moment that she put Art in the Challenger?
I think what was important to me as I was writing the movie, and something that I didn't even really realize until I had written it when we were starting to rehearse it, and the actors were starting to ask me and Luca questions about their characters, was that on the surface of it, there's a lot of moments where characters are being cruel to one another or being manipulative. But always it's the case that they're also trying to be kind. They're trying to do what they think is best for this other person, you know. So I think Tashi, whatever her designs are, it's almost always, she thinks it's almost always for the benefit of these two guys who drive her crazy for very different reasons, you know, who are insufferable for very different reasons, and also who she's drawn to and who she has a lot of love for very different reasons.
Tell me it doesn't matter. Tell me it doesn't matter if I win tomorrow.
No. You tell me if it matters. You're the professional competitor, Art. It can't be about avoiding my judgment. I'm not a nun. I'm not your mommy.
I'm just asking that you love me no matter what.
What am I, Jesus?
It wouldn't be particularly satisfying to me to write a character who's a cold manipulator, you know, because first of all, you don't meet that many people who are purely just that. So that doesn't feel like life. But also because it's just not that interesting dramatically.
Because that's one of the things that is so fascinating in thinking about those three characters. For example, like, yes, obviously Art is cheated on, but also his game does improve. Like, he sort of gets the thing that he needs out of it. So there is a way in which all three of these characters are stuck in some kind of a rut, and they do in fact get out of it in some way.
I think it's a feel-good ending. Yeah, to me it's a very happy ending.
Tell me more about that, because people definitely have a lot of questions about the ending.
Right.
That, you know, so Art leaps up, does not hit the ball, sort of crashes over the net into Patrick's arms. First of all, what is the call on that?
Well, so if you hit the net with your body or your racket at all, you've lost the point. So he gets the ball goes in, but he does hit the net and, you know, hits the other player. So he's lost the point, but it's only the first point of the tiebreak. So the match is not, we're not seeing the last point of the match. And it's completely open what happens in the rest of the tiebreak after that. For me, the point is that they're all really playing tennis again, and that all their cards are on the table, which is part of what allows them to do that. They're having the most open and direct conversation that they've had the whole film, and they're having it through tennis. So once that happens, for me, I've got what I came here for, and I don't need to know anything else.
So that's why to you, it doesn't matter who wins?
Yeah, I mean, to me, it's like the actual match has never mattered, right? It's a low-level match for less ranking points than will change either of these people's lives, for an amount of money that won't change either of these people's lives. So which is part of the reason I said it at a Challenger event in the first place, so that the stakes could be interpersonal and not official. Because that's the sort of hang-up I have with sports movies sometimes, is that, you know, a movie about the NBA Finals is very rarely going to be as engaging as the NBA Finals, because the NBA Finals is already really good, you know. It's already really dramatic.
A lot has been made of the fact that your wife, Celine Song, wrote and directed Past Lives, which is also about a tumultuous love triangle. Was there a moment when the two of you like traded pages and kind of realized what was happening?
Well, we read each other's work. I mean, we live together. Yeah. I can't speak for Celine's work beyond just saying that I'm incredibly proud of her and that, it's been incredible watching a lot of people realize what I've known for a long time, which is that she's this incredible artist. I will say I don't know that it's quite accurate to call Past Lives a love triangle movie, whereas I do think Challengers is very much a love triangle movie. I also think they're very different movies in that respect.
And how do you feel about the fact that so many people have tried or want to read the two movies against each other somehow?
I think there's an impulse in culture generally to try to sort of see a work of art as a series of clues to find out the truth about a person. And I don't really think that's what art is or ever has been. So I think it's a somewhat shallow engagement with a work of art to come at it from that perspective. Because the truth is a movie is happening in the space between the screen and your mind. And anything else is sort of, I think, depriving you as the viewer of having a richer experience with this thing that somebody's taken a lot of time to make. But that's up to people how they want to, deal with it.
Tell me a little bit about moving on from Challengers to making Queer. Was Luca Guadagnino presented you with the book? I know he had a desire to adapt the book for quite some time.
Yeah, so Queer is a book that Luca had read when he was a teenager, when it came out in Italy, because the book was written in the 1950s but didn't get published until the 1980s. And it was a book he had been wanting to make into a movie since then. And so one day we were on set for Challengers, and he handed me this book and said, read it tonight and tell me if you'll write it for me as a movie. And I read it that night and immediately said yes, even though I had no idea how I was going to approach it. The thought of adapting this book by this legendary author, and more importantly, the thought of getting to watch Luca make that movie was so exciting to me. That it just felt like something I had to do. And so, of course, I was really insanely honored that Luca would trust me with that. But then I also felt this tremendous responsibility to give him this movie he had been dreaming about, to give him the blueprint for that.
And so then what did you do? How did you sort of sync up your approach to the book so that you knew you were kind of giving Luca what he wanted?
I mean, in a way, I had to teach myself a lot on that script because it was the first time I had adapted anything. Everything I had written, whether it was a play or a novel or Challengers, which is the first screenplay, those were all originals. So my first sort of way I saw my job was just being a good reader and trying to really figure out what was fundamental in the book so that I could figure out what would be fundamental in the movie. But then as I kept working through it, I started to sort of see my job as being like a medium between these two artists, one who I knew very well at that point, and one who I was never going to know except through the work he left behind. And so I started to try to kind of open a channel between the two of them and write scenes that I felt honored Burroughs, but also write scenes selfishly that I was excited to watch Luca make.
Some viewers will be surprised to realize that the person who wrote these two movies is, married to a woman. That I'm curious, for you, making these two films that deal with queer desire or at least, a certain homoerotic desire, is that a challenge for you? Or what is it that draws you towards these stories?
In the case of Queer, I mean, that's a movie that I was very much writing for Luca. It's probably not a book that I would have adapted if I didn't know who was going to direct it, But as I was writing it, it wasn't that difficult to find what was universal about the relationship and the psychology between these two very complicated characters. Lee and Allerton are these American expats living in Mexico City in the 1950s, in this culture and in this world that just doesn't exist anymore. And that maybe never existed because it's partially a sort of fantasy in Burroughs' head. There's bars they go to that don't actually exist in Mexico, that are based on a bar he went to once in Austria or something. So it's this total world of Burroughs that I was trying to be faithful to. When it comes to the specifics of their love and their relationship, I mean, you know, I had to do a lot of research for a lot of things in this adaptation. And I ended up having to do quite a bit more research about what it's like to do heroin or what it's like to do ayahuasca than I did about how two men might have sex. You don't have to be a genius. At the end of the day, it's human relationships.
And then the book itself is a very unusual text. It was written in the 50s, didn't get published until the 1980s. And in particular, Burroughs talked about the fact that the sort of key motivation for his writing the book was an event that's not depicted in the book, when the accidental murder of his wife, Joan Vollmer. And you include a couple of allusions to that in the story. Like, what made you want to do that? And sort of how did you come to like figure out how to sort of reference that in a way?
Well, it's this really interesting thing with Queer, because in a sense, it's an unfinished book. And it's very hard to tell where the sort of quote unquote main text of Queer ends and where the life of Burroughs or where his other work begins. Because even in any edition you get of Queer, that's bookended by appendices and by forwards, and some of which are written by Burroughs himself. And in some of those, Burroughs talks about this event, the shooting death of his wife, as something that haunted the writing of Queer, you know, and that haunted his whole life, but certainly his whole career as a writer. In fact, he almost says, like, this event, without this event, he wouldn't have been a writer. There was something about it that made it possible for him to be a writer. And so it felt like we had to find a way to bring that into the movie, because otherwise we wouldn't really be adapting Queer. But at the same time, it was very important that we not make a movie about an actually existing person and instead make a movie about a character, you know, because at the end of the day, the character is William Lee. It's not William S. Burroughs. And I wasn't interested, and I don't think Luca was interested either, in writing the William S. Burroughs biopic, you know. At the end of the day, I have faith in the character, William Lee, and that's who I have to be responsible for.
And one of the things that I found most striking about the movie, and in part this is the fact that it's set in Mexico City, was actually shot in Cinecittà and Rome. The use of the miniatures is so striking.
Yeah.
There's just like a strangeness to the movie, like a feeling that something's not quite right. How did you sort of include that? How did you capture that in the writing of it?
I knew that we weren't going to shoot it in a way that softened the edges of Burroughs' surreality. You know, I knew that we were going to engage with that in some way. I didn't quite know how Luca was going to do that, but I knew that he was. And so I found myself actually drawing on a lot of the way that I would write a play, where I was being evocative rather than writing step-by-step instructions about something or being descriptive. In other words, trying to capture the feel of something. But then there's many moments where Burroughs would talk about something that was happening inside of Lee's head that I would choose to externalize, because I was excited to watch how Luca would pull that off, you know, and trust that Luca would pull it off. So I ended up writing the script in a way that I wouldn't have written it if I didn't know that Luca was going to make it.
And now the only other really major sort of film adaptation of a Burroughs text is David Cronenberg's Naked Lunch.
Yeah.
Is that a movie, like, did you and Luca reference that? Did you talk about that movie at all? Like, were you specifically trying to make something sort of distinct from it? Obviously, the books are very different.
Well, we'd both seen that movie. And interestingly, in that movie, there's sections of the text from Queer that are actually used in that movie, that, you know, but in this completely different context from which they occur in Queer, in our movie, Queer. But no, I don't think we were ever trying to, you know, make a movie in response to any other movie. We were trying to make our own thing.
And then how did you write the ayahuasca trip? Like that, so much of that imagery is so astonishing.
Yeah.
And for you, I don't know if that's from the text, if there are things you had to come up with on your own, and also things that you had that then Luca was going to have to somehow visualize.
No, I mean, the entire ayahuasca trip, the entire third act of the movie is a departure from the book, because basically the book In the book, they reach Dr. Cotter's hut in the jungle, and it looks for a moment like maybe they're going to get the ayahuasca, and then that possibility is quickly shut down, and they descend back into civilization, not having gotten what they came for. And early on in the process of talking about what this movie could be and the kind of cinematic possibilities that were within the book, something Luca and I discussed was it felt like the book was opening a door and then quickly closing it. And we wanted to see what would happen if we opened that door and walked through and saw what was on the other side. And for me, that meant that they were going to get the ayahuasca and we were going to see what, speaking on the level of intuition, what actual telepathy, getting what they think they want, what that would do to each of them and their dynamic, and whether they would respond the same way, whether that would bring them closer together or push them farther apart. So that was the force kind of driving that sequence. In terms of actually writing the specifics of it, I mean, I did a lot of research about ayahuasca trips. I watched a lot of testimony. I watched a documentary where somebody was sitting with a person as they were going on a trip and documenting it. It was sort of like I think it was a neuroscientist who had like volunteered to trip and have his lab partner document the whole thing, which was totally fascinating and a lot of fun to do. And then I wrote a sequence that was, again, more evocative than descriptive. It was kind of meant to be an invitation to Luca and to the actors to find something and to find a way to communicate what was happening that couldn't possibly be communicated in words.
It's so interesting to hear you mention that idea of opening a door and whether one goes through or not, because that line of Leslie Manville's in the movie, and when she says that the only thing you can do is to look away.
Yeah.
That really felt to me like almost like a thesis statement for the film. That seemed very much like a motivating concept for the entire movie.
Yeah, I feel that way too. And that's a line that came purely from casting Leslie, and wanting to hear her say that. Yeah.
And then just the last thing I want to ask you is simply that I don't know how much you saw these kind of things. I was a big fan of the 3 tickets to Challengers, please meme that sort of took over when the movie was coming out.
Yeah.
And did you personally have any favorites of that? Are there any other, like the movie has like caught on in such a strong way, like with the sort of larger culture. Yeah. Is there anything that you saw that you were like really taken aback by or you really loved and like seeing how people were responding to the movie?
That stuff was all really cool. Recently I saw Hideo Kojima, the creator of, Death Stranding and Metal Gear Solid and all those games, which I played quite a bit of. He posted just a picture of him with the vinyl for the soundtrack. And that was a pretty cool moment for me.
That's great.
Yeah.
Well, Justin, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. It was a real pleasure.
And that'll do it for this week. Thanks for joining us. Please look out for our next episode. Our guest will be Pamela Anderson for The Last Showgirl and John Magaro with September 5.
Malcom.